you could say, that was the last Anfield we'll ever see of Salah, and it may well play out like that. But equally, you can imagine that in 6 weeks' time, Salah's back at Liverpool, and we all kind of pretend it didn't happen.
We back, like Philip Rivers, for this grand weekend of own goals, in which league-leading Arsenal failed to score at all, but somehow won 2-1. Mo Salah's last dance, or maybe last dance, ended in glory, and the entire Liverpool fan base now left to decode the last look in his eyes when he communed with the cop after the final whistle. Manchester City lose the XG at Palace, but Haaland them to death irrespective. Sunderland out-sing and out-pride Newcastle in the most cacophonous game of the season, or at least the one with the most shirts off and bellies out amongst the fans, kind of the same thing. And sad to report, Everton's assault on the Champions League places is over after all of 7 days. Here to break it all down with me is the brain in a bottle, the footballing Fernando Mendoza, Crown Prince of Harrogate. It's the man who is Terry's chocolate orange in human form. It's Mr. Rory Smith.
How you doing?
I'm all right, Raw. I'm all right. I will say about the weekend, the only way mine could have been better was if Paul Dano was in it. How are you holding up, beautiful?
I'm all right. Yeah, it was a good weekend of football, Rog. I thought it was pretty entertaining. It's not been a blockbuster December so far, I think. But that wasn't a bad little start to the old Christmas period.
I thought it was utterly riveting, and we are finally poised before we grind the footballers that we love into dust over the holiday period for our amused delectation. But we are headed to London tonight to be with you partially, Raw. And I want to know, before we land, how does London work during the holiday season? How does England work, really? Because New York City right now is utterly overrun with like a Star Wars cantina of humanity. It's impossible.
Yeah, when I was in New York with you, a week ago, 10 days ago, it was, even by New York standards, it felt chaotic and busy and like you couldn't really use the sidewalk. London is a little bit more peaceful, Rog. Don't believe what you hear. You can still walk the streets. I don't know why people are telling you can't.
What have you heard? Fine. What have we heard? I've not heard anything. What should I have heard, Rob?
There are quite a lot of British people who currently will want you to believe that you can't walk around London without being in some way abducted or, the victim of some sort of crime. London's fine. It will be busy, Rog. It will be very busy, but maybe not quite New York levels.
God bless. I genuinely cannot wait to be with you and to just charge around the south of England, also to stop off and say happy holidays to my beautiful mum Val. But first, don't miss this exclusive limited time ticket offer. Bank of America has teamed up with Visa to offer new Bank of America cash rewards cardholders a chance to purchase up to 2 FIFA World Cup 2026 tickets. Get the details at bankofamerica.com/card FWC26. And I do want to start with a toast, Raw, raising my third first Michelob Ultra of the day, best Mickey since Arteta, to St Mirren, the buddies. Scottish League Cup champions. And they did it the hard way, knocking off that Goliath 22 times champion Celtic 3-1 to lift a major trophy for only the 5th time in the club's 148-year history. Cue euphoria and delirium on what has been called the greatest day in St Mirren's history as they lived out their team's motto, faith over fear. And the flip side is the darkness that's descended on new Celtic coach Wilfred Nancy, who arrived from MLS 3 games ago and has since become the first Celtic manager in that illustrious team's history to lose all of his first trio of games. He's done it all within one awful week. Gent arrived with his ambitious ideas that I think are very difficult to inculcate mid-season with a flailing squad, haunted board and a fan base who are set at seething. Genuine chance he might not even last a period of time known as a Bob Bradley Raw. But can we just raise all of this to St Mirren fans watching you dance and revel in your moment? It's the best of football.
I feel really bad for Wilfred Nancy. It's not the sort of club where you want to lose your first 3 games in a row. He might even be on for a partial Postecoglou there, Rog, to be fair. That is, we're in that sort of territory. He deserves better.
We are, though. Like, really, we're talking about already, like, maybe he should go back to Columbus Crew and pretend this never happened.
Celtic was an unhappy club before Nancy got there. It's not entirely his fault. There's a kind of existential crisis going on in Glasgow on both sides of the Celtic-Rangers divide. But to lose to Hearts in his first league game, to lose to Roma in the Europa League, and then to be beaten by St Mirren, and St Mirren is a small-ish Scottish club. They have a history of winning the occasional cup, but they're from a relatively small town. Their old ground, Rog, this is beautiful, Love Street. What more do you want in a football team? Known as the Buddies, and they have become kind of an established force now in the Scottish Premiership rather than Premier League. I remember speaking to someone when I was reporting on Hearts earlier in the season, still top, and a fan said to me that the thing about Hearts' manager is he's really kind of big Scottish football figure, and he said you need someone like that in Scotland. And I thought he was going to say, oh, does it Scotland and it's special? But he didn't. He said you need someone who knows how to play on the plastic pitch at Kilmarnock, and someone who knows what it means, what it's like to face Stephen Robinson St Mirren. And I think Stephen Robinson St Mirren are a little bit more direct than maybe we'd ideally like as, sort of football in aesthetes. But what an achievement to take a club like that to a trophy. And you could see what it meant at Hampden Park. It would have been just another trophy for Nancy and for Celtic. But for St Mirren, it's everything. And it's really heartening to see.
God, it's so fascinating. It's like hearing you talk about how you need a Scottish manager. It must be how to the rest of the world when we say we need an American manager to understand the American mindset over here sounds. And it is fascinating. And then I think back to like the 1980s and 90s where Scottish managers were all the vogue in England, mostly because 93% of English human beings are terrified of a Scottish accent and anyone who shouts at them. And that's how management worked at the time. But Godspeed to you, St Mirren, for one weekend bigger than Helen Mirren, which is exactly how you should be in my heart and my mind. Quick word before we dive into games. I want to note this beautiful weekend of derbies. Our cup overflow us with footballing subplots. The exact reason we created a new line of footballing feelings collection over at shop.meninblazers.com. It's garments, it's sweatshirts, it's t-shirts, it's merch. It features some of the most iconic photography that is a reflection of how we feel about the least important, most important thing, which is our football. Have a look on our website, get stuck in. Supporting us through merch is a way that we can do more. And if your emotional well-being like mine revolves around this quite mad game, have a look at these tees and hoodies and hats and get them for the holiday period. Now to the football, and let's start without further ado with the biggest story in the Premier League. Pay Mo his dough. Liverpool 2, Brighton 0, and you were there, Raw. But can I just say, this week watching Mo Salah go from Egyptian king to ultimately to just a gentleman caught in the spin cycle, the rage bait cycle. Yeah, we saw him drop for the Champions League away day to Inter after his self-immolating press conference last weekend. But what followed has been amazing. Mo is record-breaking. Mo is transcendent. And to watch him buried in the kind of pylon. We thought Kevin De Bruyne's end at Manchester City was sudden and shocking. This is now even quicker. It's like a footballing superstar in our social media age. Hemingway talked about how you get divorced or go bankrupt or whatever. He said it happens gradually and then suddenly. This is what we're seeing happen to Mo here. But I'm fascinated to hear what you thought ahead of this game, because Arne Slot had a bit of a Sophie's Choice rule about how to handle it. He said on Friday he was going to speak to Mo for the first time. He revealed that his agent actually interceded after the second game, the Sunderland game, when he was benched. But we actually still know so little. Arne was tight-lipped on Friday, tight-lipped when the decision was made to bring Mo back. 4 goals, 2 assists in 13 games. Do you start him and undermine your own authority? Do you banish him and end the career of a club legend like that? It's regicide, I believe, Raw. Or do you bench him and have him come on and hear the fans' songs which hand him leverage? I mean, how did you process it all?
Yeah, it was a fascinating place to be, Anfield, on Saturday, which has not always been the case this season, except if your interest lies in how will Liverpool collapse this time. But it did feel as though, number one, everyone was waiting for something that wasn't the football match. The main event would essentially be at the final whistle. It would be, Salah, whether he was a substitute, whether he wasn't on the pitch at all, whether he played. How did he respond in that moment? And that was undercut a little bit. I think Slot's played it quite smartly, to be honest. He said after the Brighton game that he had to drop him for the trip to Inter, because you can't do that. Whether you think the content of his interview was right, whether you think the fact of it was right, no player can come out and take issue with their manager in public. Because if you don't clamp down on it, you're setting a precedent. You're undermining your own authority. So Slot was in a position where he had to do something. So he omits him entirely from the Inter game. And I think from that point on, he's been relatively smart in how low-key he's been. So as you say, on Friday, he says, I'm going to talk to him. I'm not going to tell you what happens. On Saturday, he puts him in the team, but on the bench, which is simultaneously kind of saying, okay, he's not been ostracised, but he's not back in the team, because basically, I'm the manager, and I thought that him being on the bench was the right thing. That was an assertion of authority. And then, of course, as we'll see, it isn't that he kind of leaves him on the bench as further punishment. It isn't that he gives him 5 minutes at the end as a valedictory nod to his career. The right back gets injured, and Slot looked around and clearly thought he's the best option. That's the easiest change to make. 25 minutes in, I'll bring him on. And it gave the entire kind of proceeding this strange atmosphere, because everyone was waiting to see how it would play out. But all the scenarios we'd all war-gamed in our heads. None of them were, I bet Joe Gomez will get injured and he'll come on for him. That wasn't what anyone was expecting. I think it made it hard for everyone to know exactly how to react.
Which is probably ultimately for the best, that there was just a complete kink in the narrative telling, because when the game began, we were set up for, I think, a Guinness Book of World Records number of cutaways to the bench during a football match. In came Brighton, 8th place, above Liverpool on goal difference in this completely compressed Premier League table. Both teams still, we have to remember, just 3 points off the top 4. Brighton, though, had won just once at Anfield in the Premier League era, and let's just say they held out here longer, I believe, than any of us would ever have imagined. 46 whole seconds. Brighton live by playing the ball out the back. They die by playing the ball out of the back. Yankuba Minte had the ball by his own corner flag. 7 Liverpool players hemmed him in immediately with their press, and instead of blasting it clear, Minte decided to do an oddly angled floated crossfield switch right into the path of Joe Gomez, headed it down towards Hugo Ekitike, the Hugo Ekitike they told us not to worry about, and Hugo controlled the ball quite stunningly with one touch and then thumped it mercilessly on the volley. Fastest goal in that moment in the Premier League. It would later be beaten this season, but it was an astonishing moment. It was like rubberneckers go home, nothing to see here. What did you feel? What did you think in the moment? Was it just relief and release?
It was what's just happened. I was looking at my laptop screen. That's what I felt in that moment, because
did you not see the goal? Were you
I saw him finish it. So I saw Ekitike shoot and score, but I had no idea what had happened, because when Minte got hold of the ball, I just assumed, well, he'll boot it clear, and that's that. I will have been messing about on my laptop doing something to get ready to start writing or making notes, and you look up and suddenly Ekitike's in the middle of the box, and he is. It's a great finish, but you're not quite sure how it happened. My assumption was that maybe it'd be offside, or there was something strange had happened, because goals don't come like that. And I think that was true in the ground as well. That wasn't anybody's kind of mental script for how the afternoon was going to go. No one thought, I bet Brighton will give Liverpool a goal within a minute. And so you had this kind of release and relief, as you say, but also sense of surreality, maybe. You've got to remember, this isn't a season where many things have gone in Liverpool's favour. They've not had huge slices of luck, I would say.
After the first 5 games of the season, when we gave them maybe they used up their entire allowance. We gave them the opening phase title, but then Mo looked on with the bench with a goal like, holy crap, they're not even going to need me now. Remember, though, they would need him. Liverpool lost, I think, 4 times this season when they'd taken the lead, so this was no done and deal at all. And Brighton did show life. Minte went at Kirkes time and time again down the right, and in the 26th minute, that plot twist that you talked about, we thought we'd have to wait till the third act for Mo to enter, but no, it came early. Liverpool big man Joe Gomez went down with an injury. Slot moved Dominic Szoboszlai into the right back position, clearing the runway for who else? The Egyptian king to enter the fray. And the commentator did muse on what kind of reception Mo would get from the Anfield faithful. He was cheered onto the field. It was quite a rapturous chorus of the Egyptian king. Almost immediately responded by streaking down the right and selfishly slipped the ball to Alexis McAllister. Tried to find Ekitike again. Did not work. But I loved Katie in our Discord's reaction to all of this. She said, I think Gomez planned this injury to further peace talks, asking, does Joe Gomez get a FIFA Peace Prize if this goes well? Raw, can I get a ruling?
It would have been quite a smart thing to do, to be honest, if they had said, do you know what, Joe, you go down after 25 minutes and we'll bring him on when no one's expecting. The reaction was interesting because it was supportive of Salah, absolutely. There was no booing or anything like that. But in the ground, it didn't feel deafening. It felt slightly hesitant, I think, is probably the right way to put it. Obviously, Liverpool fans love Salah. Obviously, Liverpool fans wish none of this had ever happened. But there is a tension there that Salah has created between him and the club. And you are torn, I think, as a fan, between the player that you adore and the respect and admiration and gratitude for all that he's done, and the institution, which is what you swear loyalty to. So yeah, they sang his song, but it didn't ring around Anfield for 5 minutes. It was one burst, and then he had the chance, and everyone was very excited. But after that, it was a little bit more mixed, I think.
Quick note on this, Roy. You were struck when you were in America, one of your many takeaways, the foreign broadcast has the fans really mic'd up. Huh?
Yeah, it does. So I noticed that as I sat in bed, glorying in the wonders of watching Aston Villa 2, Arsenal 1 in my pyjamas. Yeah, in Boston. And I noticed that the crowd noise is much louder on American TV. It's reduced a little bit in England. It's still noisy, but there's definitely not as much emphasis. I assume that's to do with the sound mix. So yeah, if what came through on US broadcasters was a deafening roar for Salah, in the stadium, as someone who's been to Anfield a lot and heard the noise levels that Anfield hits, it was loud, but it wasn't that loud.
I don't like your reality. I like the fantasy that we have over here. And remember that, American fans, when you hear anything in the Premier League, just divide it by 2 if you do want a dose of fat. But let's live in our fiction. Game opened up. Both teams had chances. Brighton actually won the XG in this game. Diego Gomez in particular could not seize his moment. Then 61st minute, down the other end, from a corner no less, Mo Salah drew back his bow, delivered an arrow of a dead ball onto the head of a wide open Ekitike. 2-0. Unbelievably Liverpool's first goal from a corner this season. Raw for Ekitike in that moment, very little celebration. It's right, quite just that stoic face of a man who kind of reflected the overall mood. That aside from Mo, there are so many problems that Liverpool are grappling with, irrespective of the Salah issue being in the spotlight.
Yes, I think that's broadly true. But more pertinently, I think he'd just been told off by Curtis Jones. There'd been a little bit of an exchange in which Curtis Jones had taken issue with something Ekitike had or had not done. I don't know, and I definitely don't want to pass judgment on who was right in that. But if you look, Jones is the last player to go over to him, and Ekitike gives him the look that your partner might give you when they have finally forgiven you for some perceived slight. That was the kind of vibe there.
Not that look.
I think it was. It was more to do with the fact that Ekitike was a little bit annoyed or put out in some way by whatever Jones had said.
God bless, by the way, Curtis Jones, one of the most important Liverpool players in this transitional moment, just like he is. He talks about dogs, he talks about fights, he has been all of that in every regard.
Curtis Jones has been Liverpool's best player for 2 weeks. Curtis Jones was brilliant against Leeds. He was brilliant in the San Siro, and he was the man of the match again on Saturday. And it is interesting that in a dark moment, when the club needs someone to shine a light and to take them home, it's the Scouser who does it.
Scouser in the team. It's been Curtis Jones, it's been Szoboszlai, and it's been Ekitike. 10 goals all comps, 4 in his last 2 games. But in that moment, the Kop sang the Egyptian king to Mark Mo's. I always say this, every bloody Mo goal or moment almost seems like he's breaking a new record. 277th goal involvement for Liverpool. Opta announced that made him the all-time record by a player for a single club in the Premier League, overtaking Wayne Rooney's 276 for Manchester United. And just as impressively, Mo even tracked back in this one. He did miss a great chance towards the end. Chiesa quite generously played him in the dying embers. Mo, I think, thrust it over the bar with almost a last kick. There was a moment before that when Salah led a jailbreak. He had Virgil and Robbo to his left, and you just know he did not want to pass. He wanted to run in so desperately. He wanted to score. Did eventually try and slip them in, but hit it far too thickly. Has a man ever wanted to score a goal in a Premier League football game that was already run more desperately?
No, and the speed that Salah put in the sort of 93rd, 94th minute on 2 occasions was extraordinary. There were those 2 counter-attacks, one Chiesa, one led by Salah, which Liverpool couldn't quite convert. But you're right about the work rate, Rog. There was a lot of conspicuous tracking back from Mo Salah, more than I think you would ordinarily get. And if you try to piece together the reasons for his benching, in the game against PSV, I think the second or the third goal came basically because one of PSV's midfielders, Mauro Junior, just walked past Salah and Salah didn't try and tackle him. If you were to try and kind of connect the dots, you'd say, well, maybe that's the reason that Slot decided, okay, look, I have to try taking Salah off as well. If he can't give me the cover defensively, we need solidity. Salah did appear to have taken that on board. And you did see him scurrying back a lot more than I think he normally does, and certainly more conspicuously than he normally does. There was more conspicuous effort. But at the same time, there was plenty of kind of attacking thrust. And I guess one of the issues with Salah, as his form has deteriorated this season, has been that sense that he is trying to get the goal to lift him out of his funk. And I always think this isn't just true of Salah, but I always think that's a difficult place for a player to be in, because you're naturally then not necessarily taking the logical decision. You're not making the best decision. You're making the decision that is influenced by your own worries about your form. And I think Salah still is a little bit in that trap. It might be that with Egypt at the African Cup of Nations, he lifts himself out of it, because that's a different type of responsibility. But that has been true all season of Salah, and it was definitely true on Saturday, that he was thinking, not necessarily I want a goal because I want my moment, but I want a goal because I want to prove that I'm good enough, that I haven't lost it. And that kind of urgency has counted against him all year.
I mean, it's fascinating. I keep thinking, when Mo came on the show a couple of months ago, he talked, quite honestly, I asked him, how do you forge a new relationship with a whole new front three? And he said, that is a good question. I don't know. I mean, it was a really, everything he said then, and I'm going to link in the show notes, is how he has lived out his time since then, time which has included the spell in gym prison. It is so great to see him out. And the question is now, for how long? Because at the end, the game within the game, instantly, final whistle, we had an emotional lap of honour. Mo, stoically, I think the word could be, drinking in the adoration of the Kop, as they did sing Egyptian King quite ecstatically over and over. Mo clapped them back. He looked at them. I can't quite find the right word. He clapped, drank it in, looked at them kind of dreamily. There weren't tears. I think there was a little moistening. He worked it. It was perfectly poised. It was so ambiguous. How do we read into this? I'd say stirring emotion is properly it. What emotion exactly will be diagnosed, obsessively analysed like it's a Zapruder film by Liverpool fans as Mo goes off to AFCON for the next few weeks. He walked past him in the mix zone and laughed not twice in 2 weeks. So let's read those eyes together, Raw, because that's all we've got to go on. What did Mo's Betty Davis eyes tell you when you looked deep into them?
It's very hard to say, Rog, and I think that was what was so interesting about it to me, was that the whole afternoon was ambiguous. So the way Salah was introduced, the circumstances of him coming on, you can't read into that, because ultimately Slot made a footballing decision. His hand was forced. You don't know what he intended to do, what Salah thought was going to happen, what they'd agreed, because Joe Gomez gets injured. And then the lap of honour at the end, it was, if that is Salah's last game for Liverpool, it would stand in as his moment with the Kop, his chance to say thank you. But it wasn't so long, so drawn out, so kind of emphatic, that if he plays for Liverpool on February the 3rd, that anyone will remember it. It was relatively low-key. He was the last player on the pitch, but only by about 10 seconds, because Ibrahima Konate had been off in the corner giving his shirt to somebody. So Konate runs off behind Salah, and then 10 seconds later, Salah disappears. So you could say, that was the last Anfield we'll ever see of Salah, and it may well play out like that. But equally, you can imagine that in 6 weeks' time, Salah's back at Liverpool, and we all kind of pretend it didn't happen.
I mean, everything he does is so measured. Everything he does is so poised. Everything he does is a negotiation. We've talked about that before. Every interview he does, every thought he puts out into the world is so unbelievably calculated. And this is ambiguous. And I think it's ambiguous for everybody right now. Verge, after the game, said he wants Salah to stay at Liverpool, but said he has, quote, no idea what will happen. Arne Slot saying essentially the same. But we've got to remember, this club is experiencing multiple challenges. So let's move into what you think will and should happen. There's problems at the back, problems in midfield. There's the Isak issue. There's the Wirtz issue, which is ongoing. So what do you expect to happen? Because when I think about it, can the club risk bringing Mo back and have the Salah spotlight on the bench or starting, the agent getting stuck in on a week-by-week basis, essentially slowly degrading Slot's authority, having it almost gnawed away raw? There's the emotional and the rational. I have to believe Arne, swamped by problems right now, may see the threat of an occasionally bench Mo being a piece of flapping skin when there's so many things for him to focus on. And what he has to do is secure that Champions League place. That can't be risked.
Yeah, that's the crucial thing. That saves Liverpool's season. They have to finish 4th or 5th. That would probably 5th will do. And that's where Liverpool need to be targeting. That is the only priority. To an extent, from Slot's point of view, I think AFCON comes at a decent time. He's found a shape that's got them out of the depths of despair. They're unbeaten in 5 now. It's a very unimpressive unbeaten in 5, but they are unbeaten in 5. The crisis has abated slightly. Szoboszlai still playing well. Wirtz looks better. Ekitike's in quite good form now. There are green shoots at Liverpool. And the fact that Salah's gone away for 6 weeks, potentially, that maybe makes a decision for him, because he doesn't have to think about how to get Salah into the team. Beyond that, what I think should happen and what I think will happen are probably 2 separate things. So what I think the obvious thing here from a Liverpool point of view, Salah goes away. Liverpool have a relatively kind run of fixtures over the next month. They have to go to Arsenal, but given the circumstances, that's kind of a free hit. They won't be expecting anything from that. There'll be no pressure on them to get anything from that. So you potentially get, a month of similar to what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, kind of solid performances, nothing spectacular, put a few points on the board, stay in contention for 4th, sign a central defender, please. That would be ideal, just to offer some cover. And then you bring Salah back in January. He plays some games, not all games, and he gets to go properly in the summer. That, I think, is what should happen. That is the ideal scenario for all concerned, that Salah gets through the season as a Liverpool player. He gets a proper farewell, gets to add a few more goals to his tally, plays the majority of the time, not all the time. I think the complication there is I don't know if Salah would accept that. And the issue is I think his agent may well spend the next few weeks explaining to Liverpool in no uncertain terms that Salah will not accept that. And as you say, if that's the case, you can't really bring him back because he becomes a massive distraction, becomes a problem, affects the mood around the club, affects the mood in the squad potentially. In which case, I think Liverpool would think, if we get a suitable offer, then maybe now's the time to make the break, if that's what Salah wants. The bigger complication, and the bit that I have no idea about, I don't know if a suitable offer arrives, Rog, because everyone keeps assuming Saudi Arabia, but Mohamed Salah's on an awful lot of money, and it's not the sort of things the Saudis will do lightly, even if they decide that that's the kind of route they want to go down. So. And the other thing is, we don't know if Mohamed Salah wants to go to Saudi Arabia yet. He might not want to. He might think, as he did last season, I can still play in Europe. I can still play at the top level. I'm not ready to take the step sideways and a little bit downwards into a league where the level's not as high. I'm not sure that's in Salah's interest at this stage. So how that element of it plays out, I have no idea.
Oh, Mo to LAFC. Make it happen, baby. For Brighton, by the way, Herzl cannot win in December. This is incredible. His record at Brighton, played 9, lost 4, drawn 5, won 0. Liverpool win back-to-back games. Clean sheet to boot. Unbeaten, as you say, in 5. They travel to Spurs next Saturday to kick off, as you say, a relatively friendly slate of festive figures: Wolves, Leeds and Fulham. I love this Discord comment, which will be the final word. At Advanced Dude Bro came up with this one. Salah torching Liverpool on the way out the door. It's just a result of Chelsea's 5D chess moves finally coming to fruition. It's why we let him go in the first place. I love it when a plan comes together. I will say, Dude Bro, just the 2 titles in that incredible Chelsea gambit, I think Liverpool fans will take it. Talking about titles, to the top of the table. Arsenal 2, Wolves 1. Surely Arsenal would recover from last weekend's Aston Villa darkness. Surely they'd slap hapless Wolves, right? Losers of 13 of 15, bottom of the table, proud owners of the league's worst defensive record. Really, it seemed like a gift from the Premier League scriptwriters. Worst team in English football history after 15 games at any level. But it was Arsenal who felt grim in that first 45. No shots on target for the first time this season in the first half. Wolves suddenly combative. Arsenal had 74% possession, set up camp in the Wolves' final third. Wolves almost dared them to break their lines. They did jailbait quickly when they could through Hwang in moments. I think the closest Arsenal came was a Gab Martinelli header from a corner, which is somehow, it was pretty well standing on the goal line, failed to convert. It was truly frustration city for Arsenal fans. Ben White limped off with a hamstring strain, more defensive woe. And Raw, Emirates went quiet. There was a real angst gripping the air, a lot of frustration, kind of centred at Victor Gyökeres. Barely touched the ball, 5 touches, I think, in the first half. I found it hard to watch because Gent makes so many runs and is never fed. He's really a striker that thrives in transition. This was not a game played in transition. Where are you right now on that poor Gent?
I still think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about why Arsenal signed Gyökeres. He's not been brought in to be the world's greatest striker. He's not an equivalent to Haaland. He's brought in as an option, and that makes sense because Arsenal were lacking that kind of proper number 9 last season. But the complication there is that it's hard to get that sort of player into a structure because the structure's not designed to have a proper number 9 in it. Their instinctive thought is not there will be a striker there, as it is for, say, City, who we'll come on to. They are now playing very much with the idea of let's get the ball to Erling as fast as possible. Arsenal don't think like that. That's not how Arsenal have been designed. So I think that as much as it's easy to point at Gyökeres and say he's not of the level Arsenal require, I don't think it's that. I think it's that you're taking a player who wants to do one thing and putting him into a team that wants to do another. And that is not something that comes that quickly.
I know, I do feel for him because he was also, he's 27 years old. He's brought in to win now. There's a clip from an interview I did pre-season with Mikel Arteta that's kind of done the rounds again after the game, where I asked Mikel for his best data as to how he knew that Gyökeres would kind of take his sporting goal ratio, 97 was it, in 102 games, but he'd not proven it in the top flight. And Mikel said the best data was looking in his eyes when we first met. There is still real work to do there, and there seems to be so much pressure on his shoulders. And talking about pressure, the rest of this team, in that challenge situation, went about the whole first half and deep into the second half with unfocused frenzy. It was very hard to watch. It really became about Arsenal and the Wolves blockade, and Wolves versus fatigue at the same time. Arsenal flung on Trossard, Ødegaard, and that kind of his heroic wildcard Marino. And sometimes, we've talked about this before, in a title race you need skill, sometimes you need physicality, and sometimes you just need old school luck. And that's what happened. 70th minute, Arsenal corner. Stop me if you heard this one before. Bukayo Saka whipped in, truly a pearl, the back post. Ball sailed over everyone. Wolves goalkeeper Sam Johnson misread its flight. Ball hit, I think it was at the left hand post, with Johnson kind of flailing backwards, bounced back, hit the valiant goalkeeper and went in. Proof in terms of the poor Wolves goalkeeper who'd been so strong, you either die a hero or live long enough to have Saka bounce one in off your backbone. Raw, I've said this and we've talked about this, for all the training, for all the scheming, for all the tactics, in a title race, luck is probably the greatest intangible.
I don't know whether it's misremembering or whether it's sort of willful nostalgia. In the course of a title-winning season, there's loads of games where teams don't play well. Happens all of the time. You know, maybe the kindest interpretation is that Guardiola's City teams have kind of conditioned us to think that what champions look like is this sort of purring machine that is 4-0 up after half an hour. But they're not. There's a reason that the older fans would which is a group, unfortunately, Roger, that includes both me and you. Would recognise the term Fergie time, right? Yeah. So the Man United teams of the 1990s...
I was going to say, if older fans can remember when Liverpool were given the title after 5 games of the season, that's how football works now. It's just fruit fly memory. Go on.
We are all ageing rapidly. No, in the 90s and 2000s, you know, those dominant Manchester United teams under Alex Ferguson famously scored lots and lots of goals in injury time, and that's been remembered as proof of their doggedness, their perseverance, their ability, their energy, all that stuff, and all of that is absolutely true. But it's also true that means they weren't winning at 90 minutes because sometimes they played quite poorly, and that's what champions do. They find a way to dig it out. And yeah, this was one of those games for Arsenal. Maybe they've had a lot of fixtures recently. They've got a lot more coming up. There might be a little bit of fatigue setting in. The injuries are taking their toll, I think, in terms of their rhythm. I think there is a little bit of a kind of inflection point in terms of the psychology at the moment, because they are the team that has been top for a long time now, and they can't shake other teams off. And I wonder whether that's starting to have a little bit of an impact. But at the same time, you don't play well in every game. And sometimes, you win a game because the goalkeeper misjudges the flight of a cross and it goes in off his arse.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Lols. We meant it. We didn't mean it. Who cares? It's C Pipster 49 in our Discord came up with the term for the goal. They said, is that an Olympico? Which I love. Genuinely.
Yeah, very
Olympicos, very, very rare. Olympicos, even rarer. And probably even rarer than an Olympico, a bloody Wolves goal. Because remember, Wolves have scored once in 11 hours. An equaliser honestly felt unlikely, but Arsenal decided to sit back, invite them on, said, we are, what are we? At our heart, we are defensive meisters. I think Wolves will draw strength from their moxie in this one. 90th minute, series of crosses no one dealt with, and the Nigerian giant, Tolu Arakadare, all 6'6" of him, finally got his head on the ball ahead of Hincapié, uncorked a quite emphatic header, wrong-footed, a stun riot. It felt jaw-dropping in the moment with seconds to go, but cometh a renewed hero, because 81st minute, Gabriel Jesus had come on, 11 months out with an ACL, 28-year-old forward. Honestly, he's been out so long, bro, it almost feels like a player from another era. And so it was humanly magnificent. It really was to see Arsenal, the bottlers Arsenal, the throw it all away Arsenal, the weak, feeble-minded Arsenal, just roll up their sleeves, get rid of the fight or flight panic and just go up the field. Have Saka, quite brilliant in this game, wafted in a cross, a lethal cross. Jesus was the gentleman who charged towards it. Ultimately, the ball flew in off the defender marking him, Yerson Mosquera. He fell to the floor in utter agony as the Arsenal players celebrated all around. It was quite fascinating. It looked like Jesus had scored. Jesus did not want to celebrate because he knew it was an own goal. But the Arsenal players were so delirious. They didn't care. Just pushed this guy towards the Arsenal faithful, danced the giddy dance of men who had experienced the ultimate reprieve of being shot at and have that bullet miss. Arsenal could have gone second. This is what we were looking at. If they knew, if they drawn and City had won, they would have been in second place, but they'd emerged intact. They're still 2 points clear. And you talk about the mentality, Raw. Thierry Henry said to me midweek that was really striking. He said, when you have not won anything, you have not crossed that line, the fear of winning is bigger than the fear of losing. Astonishing. I mean, Thierry knows this. He knows Arsenal. He knows how to win. The fear of winning is bigger than the fear of losing. So with that in mind, should we worry about the quality of the performance? This was poor. And Arteta was actually a picture of masked anger post-game. Or ultimately, are results the only thing that matter in the gauntlet of December football?
Yeah, that's a good point. In December, it's just get out with what you can to an extent. That is true. But I don't think we should worry about the performance against Wolves. Just as I say, that can happen. And in title races, title-winning teams will have days when it just doesn't work and they're not really there and they have to dig deep and find a 94th minute winner against an opponent who they should be wiping the floor with. I think of slightly more concern is the fact that for the last, 6 weeks, Arsenal's form has tailed off a little bit, that the momentum seems to have slowed, and that's natural. Not every team can keep their foot to the floor all of the time. But if you look at some of the performances, some of the results, since Sunderland really, Arsenal aren't kind of the juggernaut we thought they might be. City aren't giving up. Aston Villa aren't giving up. And that puts pressure on Arsenal. And I think Henry's right that this season was always going to be psychological more than technical for Arsenal. It's about whether they can handle the pressure, about whether they can execute effectively. They're doing it so far, but the margins are getting finer and finer.
Tenacity wins titles. Arsenal's next 6 games, fascinatingly, are all ones they failed to win last season. The plot thickens. To the title chasers, Crystal Palace 0, Manchester City 3. A game defined as a battle from before kick-off when City fans commandeered Palace's quite fantastic pre-game Glad All Over song to bellow their Guardiola version. City, fresh off a clinical win at Real Madrid, the one that left poor Xabi Alonso thinking about urology and his tenure on the brink. Pep had never lost at Selhurst Park, and Palace, though, battling both their opponent and a quite brutal schedule, which has been a product of their success, but is also probably their biggest challenge. Cagey opening, City boss possession, possession. Palace, though, flung it long constantly to Mateta to kind of bully and probe in behind the City backline. And they had chance after chance, to be candid. Wharton fed Pino in on goals, and he scooped the one-on-one over the bar. Then Mateta with the wide open chance. God bless Adam Wharton. A beautiful footballer to witness. He's like a conductor of men at the heart of all that was good. The sting of his flashing blade. Really, the idea of Adam Wharton really seemed to subdue City. That rocked them almost, to be candid, until it didn't. Erling Haaland had 8 touches in the first half. He seemed like a non-factor until he was. City snapped into life. Núñez found space on the right, lashed in the cross. Haaland created brutal separation from Alabama's finest, Chris Richards. Just went big air, don't care. 1-0, and it was so deflating. It was like Palace had fought so bloody gamely. And then City just have this nuclear option raw. Just give it to Big Earl. And on one hand, the road to 200 goals starts now. But man, I was like, did Palace not watch videotape defensively before this one?
But I'm not sure there's anything you can do. That's the problem, because Haaland does have that kind of that leap, that ability to understand defenders' movement, defenders' motion, to get himself a little pocket of space. And as soon as a decent ball goes in, he's going to score, because this is Erling Haaland's secret, I think. He's enormous, and that gives him a massive advantage. So, yeah,
Is it like for you as an under-8 coach, it's just like play the big kid?
Fortunately, as an under-8 coach these days, Rog, they're not allowed to head the ball. It's all banned. This is the last. We all need to get used to. We should all enjoy this, because there is a generation of kids coming through who will never have headed a football and will be terrible at it. Which is fine. It's good. It protects them. It's better for their.
But also
health,
there'll be some dads with their 4-year-old there's some 4-year-olds who do bare knuckle boxing illegally in basements. There'll be some dads be like, kid, I'm going to give you an advantage. Come on.
I am conscious this is a public forum, and I will not say that I'm aware that there are 4-year-old kids doing bare-knuckle boxing in basements. That's not something I've ever encountered, Roger.
But they are doing the headers. They're doing the secret header training.
Do you know what? There is a massive... I've not thought of that, but there would be a massive competitive edge to training your kid to be amazing at headers. Because in England, it's banned, I think, until they're 11.
Yep. It may do your IQ in, son, but think about how great that first contract's going to taste.
By the time they're 11, they'd be the only kid who could head it. It would be such a competitive edge. No, I think the problem we have with City and assessing their performances now is that you can watch Manchester City and think they are not playing well, but they don't need to, because as soon as you need one decent delivery, and the cross from Núñez was fantastic, and Haaland does a little bit of a shimmy to get away from Richards, and you get a goal, and that's the danger that City pose now.
Second half, much of the same. Wharton creating the alchemy. Palace, perhaps done in after European endeavours again. Really, they don't have a big enough squad to rotate. They couldn't summon a finish. Oliver Glasner actually said this was Palace's best performance against Manchester City under him, even though it ended in a 3-0 defeat. And he might be right. They actually won the XG in this game. It was 2.24 to 1.32. You could tell both managers were frustrated for very different reasons getting into it on the sideline. Palace kept coming with their mischief, but City were ultimately a bit like a big dog annoyed by a small dog who thought it was a big dog. And Phil Foden, that Mancunian pit bull of a footballer, I still believe he was carved in a woodshed by Pep Guardiola himself, who breathed life into his manny son. He put the game away. Another Cherky assist, 6 of the season. Incredible. I think he started 6 games. Another trademark Foden goal. In space, around the edge of the box. Defender in front of him. He loves that defender in front of him. I think it was Chris Richards again. And just deceiving the keeper with his lethal placement rather than his power. 6 goals in his last 4 Premier League games. Raw. Really the product of a superhuman clinicality that's back.
Yeah, we've been saying for a long time that City needed to relieve the burden on Haaland, to find someone else who wasn't Burnley's Maxime Esteve to score goals for them. And Foden has stepped up. And the last, I think, 6 weeks, 2 months, he's probably been City's best player. He looks like the player he was a couple of years ago. He kind of went missing for 18 months, but he seems to have recovered completely. As you say, he has that signature goal now. And that's such an important thing. You know if Phil Foden gets the ball 20 yards out, relatively central, you know what he's going to try and do, and no one can stop it. And that is kind of what City needed at this moment. And it's also what Foden needed, as it did feel as though his career had plateaued a little bit. Now he seems to have found another level.
God bless. And Pep has talked a little bit about how Phil Foden was dealing with mental challenges, which he has most certainly overcome. And it is incredible to see him back loving his football again. Haaland wrapped the game up with a penalty after essentially a kick-off return by Savinho. Led to him being fouled. 17 Premier League goals on the season. 3-0 City. Clean sheet. 4 league wins in a row. 2 points back from Arsenal. Far from perfect. Definitely vulnerable in behind. But as Pep said, they are growing in resilience, which is one of the most important qualities for title winners. Raw, how scared should we be of this kind of undeniably potent but undeniably flawed City on a scale of 1, Nolito, to 10, Big Earl?
Maybe not quite 10, because I still think there is an inconsistency there. And if you look at their fixtures over the holidays, you've got Forest away, which, given the Sean Dyche-ness of Nottingham Forest at the moment, will not be easy. They're at home to Chelsea. They're away at Sunderland, who've already taken points off Liverpool and Arsenal and Chelsea. The holiday period will be a bit of a test for them. I still think they are maybe better suited to winning the Champions League than the Premier League, City. I think that over the course of 2 legs, they can beat pretty much anybody. Whether they can sustain it, if Arsenal continue to pick up points, I don't know. But the one thing that is absolutely true is that Arsenal will be looking at where Manchester City are and thinking, I'd like it if they weren't there.
God, I keep having Thierry Henry's words echo in my head and I cannot shake them. To third place, West Ham 2, Aston Villa 3. West Ham, let history remember, scored after a now season best 29 seconds on the clock. Fernandes screamed, reload the bubble machine. Raw, can you believe this? That West Ham of all teams do not believe the life truth. You should never score too early. I mean, I watched that and I was just like, what are you doing? I pity the fools.
West Ham are not in a position to reject goals gifted to them, even if they are very obviously far too early. West Ham need all of the goals and all of the help they can get.
I mean, this is against Villa, 9 out of 10 win Villa, and of course they fought back. Mavropanos, fine own goal finish under pressure from Ollie Watkins. West Ham, though, valiant. Goal scored, I love this, a goal scored while claiming a penalty at the same time. Bowen sharp instinctual finish. But my God, this West Ham, it must drive Nuno, who is like the master of defensive foundations, so crazy how his team cannot keep a clean sheet and cannot hold on to a lead. Villa got themselves back even with a Morgan Rogers spin and finish. Then 79th minute. It was a you-call game from a distance. I think from a distance that even Steph Curry would be like, wow. That is far out. A top spin dipper. I think someone said it had an XG and expected goals of 0.02, that chance. But agony for West Ham. Delirious joy for Aston Villa. 10 wins in 11 top flight games for the first time since 1919. 3 goals on an expected goals of 0.67, which is actually really fascinating because Villa are shooting out the lights right now. They are 3 points back in a pack which have separated themselves from those chasing. Is this for real? Or is you see the XG data, is a reversion to the mean in their future?
So you remember we talked about the noise levels on American TV? Do you want the American TV answer or do you want the British stadium answer?
You know what? We come to you, Raw, for one thing and one thing only, the British stadium answer. Speak truth to us, man. So
just to kind of get my credentials out there, I love Aston Villa. Aston Villa have always been kind of one of those. There's 2 or 3 teams, other English teams that I have a bit of a soft spot for.
What are they? Villa,
Leeds, and Leicester are the other 3.
What?
My dad's a Leicester fan.
Your dad. For me, it's Bournemouth and Crystal Palace, I think. But go on, Bubs.
Because of Bill Foley and Chris Richards, the two defining figures of the English football landscape.
My 2 dads.
So, what a couple they'd be.
I know. What do you mean would be? Am I not meant to? I'm breaking news, and I don't want to tell it. By the way, at this point, I do have to lift up my Bill Foley bobblehead, which I do keep meaning to glue that hand back on, and I do apologise, Bournemouth. I actually don't know where the hand's gone now, but go on.
So I have a lot of, I've got a lot of affection for Villa. You're right. The XG is fascinating. Villa are brilliant at scoring goals from outside the box. Now I could be wrong. But everything that data tells me about football would suggest that hot streak will stop at some point and that they will face the problem they had at the start of the season again, which is that they don't create that many clear-cut chances, Aston Villa. That has been an issue all season. I think they are on a hot streak. They have an exceptional manager. They've got some brilliant players. They've got some players who are kind of at that kind of crest of their journey, Morgan Rogers being the obvious example. They are without question a team that can qualify for the Champions League again. I think they will finish in the top 5. But I think as winter becomes spring, the fact that they're playing in Europe as well will start to drain the squad. And that's the issue they'll face.
The game's coming up for the Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal 2 Electric Boogaloo. So I'd say let's speak on December the 30th after that final whistle, and we will see what is for real. And I do hope there. I love John McGinn. I adore that man and his just ginormous buttocks, kind of buttocks you say in Liverpool. You could rest the pint on.
Roger, it would be amazing if Villa won the title. That would be an amazing story, as much as Arsenal fans wouldn't enjoy it or, thank me for saying it. It would be incredible to see one of English football, founder member of the Football League, the biggest club in the second city, the team that hasn't won the title since the early 1980s, to see Villa win the league again.
I don't think I can hear this so much. I've got to tell you, if Arsenal do not win the league, I think it will be humanly, utterly devastating for not just for Arsenal fans, but for humanity in general, for reasons we can talk more of. Please God, we'll never have to speaketh of that darkness. To the fun game of the weekend. Sunderland 1, Newcastle United 0. Behold, the Tottenham Weir derby. We talked about it last week. One of the fiercely felt rivalries in English football. The Guardian Raw actually dug into the history of the Gripple Grapple in depths I did not even know. Did you know this? They said it's a rivalry between two cities, 12 miles apart, and it dates back to the 17th century, when Newcastle was royalist, Sunderland backed the parliamentarian rebels. Such tribalism intensified, they wrote, when during the later Jacobite uprisings. I don't know what the Jacobites are. Are they Jacob Murphy's predecessors? Newcastle supported the Hanoverian monarchy. Sunderland sided with the Scottish Stuarts. This is why we watch football, right, Raw, to live out royalist versus parliamentarian 17th century beefs.
The thing is, when you go to Sunderland, they are forever talking about the Jacobites. I wish they'd shut up about the Jacobites.
Always on about the bloody Jacobites.
You get this a lot with rivalries, and people will tell you that Liverpool Manchester United is all about the ship canal and something about wool.
What, trade in like the 19th century?
Yeah,
the trade balance. It is, though.
But it isn't. It's because they're close cities and people in one city don't like the people in the city next door. That's just the nature of life.
There's that too.
And also, I think the root of the Sunderland-Newcastle football rivalry is that they each have football teams that want to beat the others. I don't think that you don't think there was a lot of young people being like, Dad, but the Jacobites No one was banging on about George III or whatever, whoever the Hanoverians were. I'm not entirely sure. No one was talking about that outside the Stadium of Light on Sunday.
Oh, God.
They might have been talking about police horses.
God bless the police horses and God protect them. What we did know, this was the first such league meeting between the teams in almost 10 years. Shane on our Discord said, my God, they've waited a long time for this. They've been storing up spite for so long. I love the idea of spite storage, and I think, God, whoever can actually market that, if you could store spite easily, God, you'd make a fortune.
Can you imagine the data centres you'd require?
And that would be amazing.
You'd need so much energy to store spite.
Economic development. I'm going to start storing all the spite across the Midwest. It would be genuinely and unbelievable. I think life would be so much better if we had somewhere to put our spite instead of carrying it inside of us. But anyway, irrespective, that passion, because spite and passion, there's a thin line between the two, just bled through the pre-match. The noise, the song, Sunderland tifo of a giant black cat killing a magpie. My favourite Raw, the fact that on the scoreboards at Sunderland, Newcastle were listed simply as visitors without a crest, which is, I have to say, a level of pettiness I can get behind.
It's the sort of puerile, childish nonsense that really enriches a derby.
Can you imagine who thought of that? Like, the meeting. Do you think they had let's ideate, let's have a creative meeting about how we can unleash our hate?
I think they were all sat there in 18th century Stuart costume, which is the way that people traditionally dress in Sunderland.
Yep.
Thinking,
how can we bring the Hanoverians down?
We normally put the Newcastle badge on. I'm sure this is, and Sunderland fans, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is a relatively new twist on this. I'm pretty sure they used to show the badges. Let's just put visitors. Let's even refuse to name them. That is a suggestion that someone should have said that's a bit much. It's not, we shouldn't really be stoking this hatred. But they thought, no, actually, let's sod it. Let's just do it. And it's Sunderland at the moment, so stuff tends to work.
By the way, I've got to say, we are now memeing on scoreboards. That is a slippery slope. It will not be too long before, like, the next one, it goes in a spiral, and, like, the next year will just be like scummers. We're going to a very, very dark place, but a lighter place. The atmosphere. It was intense. It was cacophonous. I bet you even on British TV there was a little bit of noise. But maybe because of it, the football was bloody terrible. It felt like a game in which it was just a series of fouls underscored by a cacophony of booing. Newcastle, has to be said, set up incredibly cautiously. I bet they rue that. Sunderland, though, couldn't break them down. No Premier League game has had fewer shots or touches in the penalty area in the first 45 than this one. I think there can be something as too much passion. Second half, marginally more composure, marginally. 46th minute, a long McKaylee throw in was cleared and recycled back on the right. He slung in a great ball, and it was Nick Voltemada in his own area, the German giant, defending the original long throw. Got his head to the cross, headed it quite beautifully and cruelly off the underside of the bar. I will say, Raw, if there's a Puskas for own goals, and we saw so many this weekend, this one's definitely a nominee. And I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, this man, he was in agony, by the way, afterwards, agony. But even his own goals are just transcendently brilliant.
I felt desperately sorry for Voltemada, who's had a really good start to his Newcastle career, but will need to have a much better next 6 months if he's going to wipe away the memory of the first Weirtime derby that he played in. It's a really weird own goal. It's really hard not to watch it and think, has he got confused about which end he's at? It's a genuinely brilliant finish. And he seems to, watching the replay, he seems to flick his head to try and do it.
Yes, he's different gravy. He's just like, I am, yes, a striker, but I'm an avant-garde performance artist first and foremost. And I love you, Nick Voltemada. I'd love it. He's the one Premier League footballer I want to have come on the show the most at the moment. The game now, it's a bit like watching the Iron Bowl and have it end 2-0 courtesy of a safety. The action was off the field. Sunderland remain undefeated at home. Newcastle fans, I think, will be furious at the lack of ambition. Eddie Howe did take a beating from his own supporters after this game. But despite the lack of football, at the final whistle, the Sunderland fans weeping. Mothers, daughters, sons, dads, shirtless dads, to be candid, most of them, just revelling in this moment. I have to say to American fans, this town, Sunderland, has suffered so bloody much economically, politically. It was kind of left bereft in post-industrial England, this shipbuilding and coal town. I mean, both of those industries dried up, and it is a tough town. It's a proud town. And this rivalry, like Newcastle, really is heartfelt because both towns have suffered. Both towns have suffered footballingly as well. This game was long awaited. The celebrations at the end, Rory, the lap of honour for the players, the laps of honour, the photographs taken in front of the fans. You could just see memories being made for that Sunderland fan base who have really, really walked the hard miles that will last forever being forged before your eyes. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, and I think what's really significant is that they'd not played this derby in the Premier League for nearly 10 years. There was an FA Cup game a couple of years ago that Newcastle won pretty easily when they were a Premier League team and Sunderland weren't. But this is the first time in an awfully long time that it feels like Sunderland are kind of level pegging with Newcastle. And even, if you squint and take away a little bit of context, you could maybe say that it's a better time to be a Sunderland fan than a Newcastle fan. And that hasn't happened for a really long time. So, me getting on for 20 years. And that must feel there must be such a lightness to it. They must be reveling in that so much that, yeah, it was a terrible game and it took a freakish own goal to win the derby, but they won the derby. That they're ahead of them by 4 points in the table. They may well be realistic enough to recognise that might not last. That Newcastle's strength in depth might tell. But for the first time, if you're a Sunderland fan, you can wake up today and think it's better being a Sunderland fan than a Newcastle fan, and that's a really precious feeling.
It is indeed. And by the way, I love that line. If you squint and take away a little bit of context, that's how I'm going to approach everything in my life from here on in, like this, baby.
Makes it better.
The world instantly 1,000,000% better. You've solved a lot of problems I've got today, Raw. Talking of problems, Nottingham Forest 3, Tottenham Hotspur 0. Winner gets to keep Morgan Gibbs White for Evs. Forest called really BS on Spurs' incredible away record. Scored 3 goals for the 4th time in 5 weeks. That's Sean Dyche football. Liquid. First goal gift in the spirit of the season. Vicario playing the ball into the teeth of the Forest press. The poor young Archie Gray, who was actually calling for it, but should never have been given the ball. Took a touch he shouldn't have taken. Sangare breathing on his neck, charged in. Vicario parried, and it was Hudson-Odoi slapped home the follow-up and made it 2. Old Callum with a cross that was a shot. We used to call it a chasse or a scrot. Vicario again in danger of making himself a one-man scapegoat with that one, but a sensational third. It was Sangare striking from distance. Left Forest fans absolutely delirious. Sean Dyche's Forest fans dancing on Spurs' grave, singing, "We're Nottingham Forest, we're taking the piss." God bless Spurs, though. Woeful in this one going forward. Kudus just ran into nowhere, coughed up the ball. Richarlison couldn't hold it up. Xavi Simon's back to lost boy settings. I think 0.37 expected goals. Just a single shot on target. There's blunt. There's utterly impotent. I do think Thomas Frank's Spurs are, at this point, footballing erectile dysfunction with some of these statistics. 22 points across their opening 16 Premier League games. They've last recorded fewer at this stage of a campaign in 2009. They had one more point and were one place higher in Ange's Disastro campaign last year. 1 win in 7 top flight games. Though good news, I have to throw this in, just 6 points off 4th place Chelsea still. Thomas Frank forced to admit, Raw, improving Spurs' present reality is, quote, not a quick fix, saying if no one gets the time, no one can turn this around. No one doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Is he speaking the truth though, Raw? And will the truth even save him?
It's tricky. So part of me thinks that Spurs are probably missing their best 3 players through injury. And you can really tell. No Solanke, no Kulusevski, no Maddison. And that makes a big difference. And I think they are a totally different proposition if 2 of those 3 players are in the team, to be honest.
Anything.
Then you have the compression of the table, which, and Roger, you and I have talked about this on here. We've talked about it privately. I think we're responding to results wrongly. I think the way that we're reading the table is not me and you personally, just like in general.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. What? Football fans reading the table wrongly? We're all about emotion now. We're not at all. Like, the table actually doesn't matter. I'm pretty convinced, and I'm going to talk to you more about this tomorrow. We don't care about table. Where we are. Yeah, it's all about the vibes.
And by that token, if you looked at Spurs, yeah, all right, they've 22 points from 16 games is pretty bad. But Chelsea, who certainly in patches we've been saying having quite a good season, have only got 6 points more, and that isn't a world of difference. That's a shot hitting the post that could have been a goal. It's one slip in defence. It's a couple of results, a couple of minor things in a couple of games. And I think we have to start factoring that in when we're assessing teams' performances. But that said, I think in the context of Spurs' last season, that underperformance under Postecoglou in the league, I think given the money they've spent on that squad, given the expectation of the club, given where they want to be, there is a lot of pressure on Thomas Frank, and it does feel a little bit like they play Liverpool at home on Saturday. That is the crisis baton derby, because whoever loses, I mean, if they draw, they're probably both okay, to be honest. But whoever loses, you feel as that kind of they descend into the depths again. The Spurs had kind of come out of their little crisis, and then they get beaten very heavily at Forest, and it feels like the clouds are gathering again. Same for Liverpool. There are a lot of teams who are living like that at the moment, where 1 result, 2 results means suddenly the world looks like a very different place.
And why be rational when you can be knee-jerk and headless? I think more and more football is genuinely just that place for us all just to vent. The world is dark and twisted. Let's lose our mind completely over football and not have to store up our spite. That's the one damage to the spite store, the one challenge to the spite storing industry that we're both working on frantically.
But the other thing, Rog, and similar kind of thing. How on earth did Forest lose 3-0 to Everton?
I mean, that happened. I mean, again, when you said earlier, we're old football fans, that was like in the days of yore. Football is both knee-jerk and whatever happened 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago may as well have happened last century. It is so irrelevant to our thinking. God bless mindlessness and short-term thinking and just the erratic nature of this season's Chaos League. In other games, Burnley 2, Fulham 3. An agonising 7th straight defeat for JJ Watt's Burnley, as they now are masters right now of close but no cigar football. 5 points from safety. For Fulham, the triple joy of victory of Anthony Robinson returning for the first Premier League start since May this year. 202 agonising days. He went the full 90 and it was magical to watch. How we US fans need that man. And then Harry Wilson, age 28. Just rounding into the form of his life. 3 goals, 3 assists in his past 4 games. Mr. Bangers only. Ultimately, this is the amazing thing, Raw. This was Fulham's first win at Burnley in 35 games, aka 1951. When you hear that, I find that inspirational. Who says you can't change history, Raw?
Also, Fulham winning at Burnley in 1951 would have been a massive shock. Because Burnley were good then. That was when Burnley were a powerhouse.
Yeah.
It's less of a shock now.
But, by the way, Fulham, also pretty bloody good. God,
yeah, they would have been, yeah.
I wish we could do I wish people had podcasts back then, and then we can really have deeper truths. Talking about deeper truths, Brentford won, Leeds United won. Really an echo of Merseyside derbies past in this one, because 2 old Liverpool-based veterans had the day, talking about the city, not the club. First, Jordan Henderson honoured Diego Jota beautifully with his celebration after his first Brentford goal in his 600th game in English football. It looked like it may have given Bees the points, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin, love you Dom, had other ideas, equalised in a style that was honestly phenomenal to witness. 4th in 4 games for DCL. And I know the resurrection is Easter, not Christmas, but it is so unbelievably, I say, just joyful. It feels so fulfilling, Raw, to witness that man's joy on the football field again.
This podcast, Rog, is pro Dominic Calvert-Lewin and pro the causes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and always has been. And it's one of the most heartwarming stories of the season. Just to see him scoring goals again, feeling confident again, looking like his old self. And he's always been a bit streaky, DCL. But when he's in that hot streak, he's a brilliant player to have. He's an incredible weapon for Leeds. He
needs to feel love and be loved. And he is a player where everything is possible, and without those two, nothing feels like it's going to happen for him. I find it incredibly humanly rewarding to watch his happiness. Leeds now have a 3-point cushion ahead of West Ham, just above the moon door of the relegation zone. Manchester United host Bournemouth tonight. United now loser of just 1 of their last 9 games. Amarim's boys, I mean, maybe not worth a full-blown haircut, but at least a shape-up, yeah, guys. Which means, let's close with, why not, some human darkness. Chelsea 2, Everton 0. Somehow Everton were winners of 4 of the last 5. I don't even remember them either. We were in 7th place, 2 off the top 4. I'm just saying this for my own benefit. Didn't we almost have it all? I don't know who we are anymore, but I also knew going into this we had not won at Stamford Bridge since 1994. And yes, Chelsea hate December. And yes, they had no wins in 4. They'd just been humiliated at Atalanta in the Champions League. And yes, this is meant to be Kieran Dewsbury Hall's revenge game. Gent in the form of his life, ready to wreak vengeance at levels known only to Liam Neeson in Taken 1, 2 and 3. But my God, his happiness lasted 14 minutes, limped off with a hamstring knack, and that's kind of where you felt it was not going to be our day. Having said that, Everton opened with confidence, Raw. We knocked the ball around. I think this is the best opening spell I've seen this play this season, which can only mean one thing. Chelsea's first meaningful attack, 21 minutes. Gusto slipped in Cole Palmer, making his first start. Welcome back, Cole, in the league. Mikalenko switched off, of course he did. Palmer raced in, gave a little picky the eyes. Gent's first goal since September. First appearance at Stamford Bridge since August. I was watching Raw with my eldest son Samson, who'd come back to watch it, and he just broke my heart in that moment. He just turned to me, he said, "Oh, Dad, I've forgotten how miserable watching this team makes me feel."
I'm not sure that's a warranted response given the circumstances. They are still, even at that point, at 1-0 down, Everton are in the mix. This is not a season when Everton are going to get relegated. There is no worry of relegation. There is no need to sack the manager and start again. Everton are having a nice time.
Yeah, but even the nice time, like in moments like that, you remember this is because we are so good at football right now, but so inherently limited without any fullbacks or a striker. So we're almost good, which is actually worse than being bad. Being almost good is honestly more frustrating because we kept creating and passing and moving and almosting, and then stroke of half-time, again, couldn't defend the most basic element of space. Pedro Neto sliced and diced. Poor Mikalenko again. Set up Gusto for a fine finish. Chelsea ultimately did us by having the composure around the net that we just lacked completely. David Moyes asked after the game for the main difference between Chelsea and Everton. Raw, he said, maybe £1 billion.
Well, that's it. And I think the one thing that's holding Everton back the most is that the positions where Everton are lacking are the ones where it costs a fortune to reinforce, and the talent is pretty rare. So if you put a top-class number 9 or a top-class kind of inverted winner or whatever into that Everton team, then they would get a lot better. But to do that, you need to persuade a 70 or 80 million pound player to play for Everton. And that is, without all jokes aside, that's tricky, because if there's a player who's worth that much money, clubs with sort of grander horizons than Everton will be in for them.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that. I'll get to that in a minute. I've got to say, for Chelsea, I thought Fofana and Chalobah were just terrific. Just took the wind out of our sails. We needed the goal. We couldn't so much as coax a shot, I think, in that second half. Our dreams turned to shattered dreams, as they do. And it wasn't just a loss this game. It was like utterly debilitating because of those profound vulnerabilities you just identified that are so unbelievably evident. And then also to live the darkness of the memes. It's not just how do we coax players to come to us. It's how do you keep the great players with us? You know, fans are now agonising. This is modern football. Forget the game. We now have to watch Reece James talking to Illy and Dye post-game. Both men have their hands over their mouth. And Chelsea fans are going wild. This means and Dye is Chelsea. Here we go. And Everton fans are like, it's just innocent talk. It doesn't mean anything. He's off to AFCON anyway. But this is modern football. Everton's Stamford Bridge curse continues. We've not won since the World Cup. Was last in America. I think next year will be our year. But first, don't miss this exclusive limited time ticket offer. Bank of America has teamed up with Visa to offer new Bank of America cash rewards card holders a chance to purchase up to 2 FIFA World Cup 2026 tickets. Get the details at bankofamerica.com/card FWC26. But Raw, we have to finish with a quick Chelsea note post-game in a weirdly premeditated way. Your winning coach, Enzo Maresca, decided this was the moment he would announce that the previous 48 hours were his, quote, worst as a Chelsea head coach. A lack of backing for him and the team. It was a very odd, curious choice of words. It's been taken as a thinly veiled shot at his owners. No one quite knows what he means. It was cryptic. I think it was intentionally cryptic. But that creates a vacuum. And nature thinks it hates a vacuum, but football media hates it even more, Raw. So we've all got to analyse it. I don't know if you've got anything to add to this weird one, but it was definitely a choice.
Yeah, it was a really strange moment because, okay, Chelsea's form had dipped a little bit since they beat Arsenal 1-1, and it looked like maybe a lot of the feel-good factor around Maresca had started to dissipate a little bit. But there was no real sense of it being a club in crisis. It's not like they can be arguing about transfers just at the moment because, well, 1, it's December, and 2, surely Enzo Maresca can't possibly think that his owners aren't going to do enough transfers. Like, that is normally what that means. That kind of, there's no support. That normally means I want to sign a player and they won't let me. But it's Chelsea, so surely the likelier problem is that they want to sign 9 players and Maresca doesn't want that. So I don't have any insight into what he meant, but it does create just a little bit of a cloud, because now you're wondering, well, actually, hang on, how happy is this camp? How unified is everybody? Is there some tension behind the scenes that could yet kind of derail what's been a broadly positive season for Chelsea? And that's not great.
God bless that man who constantly seems in waves to be on the ins and the outs, and it's an incredibly difficult way to live anybody's life emotionally.
Maybe he needs that. Maybe Enzo Maresca needs to feel something, Rog. Maybe just stuff being fine bores him. Maybe he just needs to have some sort of crisis afoot. So when there's nothing going on, he sort of thinks, actually, do you know what, I'll go to war with the owners. Let's go to the war with the owners, and I'll see if that wakes me up.
Maximum edger, Enzo Maresca. But let us finish with some quality footballing insight, finally. From a GFOP, Heather from Brooklyn, self-described big fan of the Arsenal, the Gotham, US women's national team, and in her words, our oft-beleaguered US men's national team. Raw, do the honours.
And Heather has, and I quote, a radical idea that I think is a solution for both Tottenham and the USMNT, which is not an acronym I like. On one side,
by the way, no other nation does that. It's so fascinating.
On one side, we have Thomas Frank, genuinely great coach, but who will likely not last the season at Spurs. We can go into all the whys and wherefores, but ultimately we know where this is headed. That's quite sad. And here in the US, we have Mauricio Pochettino, also an immense talent. But if we're really honest with ourselves, not a great long-term fit for the US men. But more to the point, a guy who genuinely wants to go back to Spurs. Spurs! Her emphasis. It feels like being in a relationship with someone who is still pining for their less hot ex, and that doesn't feel good for anyone. Also, how is someone pining for Spurs going to lead us to World Cup victory next year? It's a good point. Chances are they get knocked out early. Hear me out. Before he gets snapped up by another team that doesn't understand or deserve him, we need to jump on Big Ange Postecoglou and lock him in for the USMNT. Stat. Yes, I'm talking before the World Cup. That fast and furious style of Ange ball perfectly fits the US mentality. Just imagine the delightful havoc that could be wreaked with both Diego Luna and Gio Reyna on the pitch under his gentle but chaotic tutelage. Bring in Clint Dempsey as assistant, approve of that, and the new era of US soccer fever will commence. What better way to attract new American soccer fans? Added bonus, Big Ange won't have to flinch when he calls it soccer. As an Aussie, he's been calling it that his whole life. I can't see any possible hitch in this plan, except that I don't have any pull here. Maybe you can reach out to your contacts to help make this happen, but please hurry. We don't have much time. Thank you in advance. Kind regards, Heather.
Oh, I mean, the specifics I don't really quite co-sign, but I do love the idea that teams can trade managers instead of players, like that old terribly named reality TV show Wife Swap. By the way, I'm sure Liverpool fans would love to try and think about how they play that game right now. But Raw, what do you think of this? Because it's there's something about it that makes me feel a little woozy.
So I think that there is a logic to it. I agree with the basic idea that I think US fans would warm to the style of play that Postecoglou advocates. I think that it would be good to watch. Funny enough, I think that Ange is in a footballing sense is quite American.
Oh, you know, he's kind of American.
He feels like an outsider to that kind of internecine, like quite insular European football world. And I think there's quite a lot of American fans who see in Ange kind of an avatar for how they're treated or how they are kind of addressed almost. So I think there is a natural like symbiosis there. But at the same time, and I want to make this very clear, I think it's a dreadful idea. I think it would not be a good idea at this stage, or maybe at any stage, to be perfectly honest, because I'm not sure that style of football will work at international level.
Yes!
Because it has to be, you need time to understand Ange's system, and international coaches don't have time. So what you get is a terrible version of it.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
We would self-familiar. I mean, by the way, it is fascinating to see. I'll say this: what Mauricio Pochettino does after the World Cup, whatever happens, because when he was hired, he was introduced as a man who'd be with us for the long-term, big picture. And I'll just say, we will see. I think Big Ange, though, yes. Intellectually fascinating as US coach. I'm very fond of him. His team talks would do massive numbers on social media. But what you're saying, Raw, and hinting us towards international football coaching is mostly about vibes and creating team culture. Because the coaches have so little time with their team. And so Andrew would be very good at that. But international football is also more about being defensively robust. Stay with me here. About kind of sneaking goals from set pieces or on the break. I will say Ange's kind of tactical style, which is best described as charging at the machine gun pillbox together, I think would utterly prove disastrous at international level. So if I could choose, this is what's so weird about your question. If I could choose one Premier League manager to run the US team, well, it would probably be Jurgen Klopp, just for the collective joy and the belief that he can give players when they take the field that they can win, which I think is really critical. Confidence that he believes in you just makes you super powered. But a coach that I would take, Raw, is Thomas Frank. Because we are essentially in the US the Brentford of international football. You know, their style of football under him, defensively robust with a clear idea of how we're going to score, which is so critical at international football. I think that's what we need to go deep, baby.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Frank is a much more naturally suited manager to the international game than Postecoglou. Postecoglou has been in charge of Australia previously. If Ange was in charge of Brazil, it might work. If he had better players than everybody else, maybe. He's not going to be in charge of Brazil, so we don't need to worry about that. But Frank, I think, is perfectly suited to to international football, which is basically a pragmatist's carnival. That's what it is. It's who can compromise the best with limited resources. Even for France or England or Spain, the countries that have got huge amounts of natural talent, you still have to make compromises to get a team out of these slightly like offset resources. And Frank is much better at that than Postecoglou. So yeah, if you're going to do a straight swap, Pochettino for Frank isn't a terrible idea. Pochettino for Postecoglou, and then Frank just staying at Tottenham. If Heather's an Arsenal fan, maybe she's happy with that. I don't know. That doesn't make as much sense to me. But I think Pochettino will do all right with the US, especially with the group that they've got. The ticket prices mean that there won't be anyone in the stadium, so that'll be fine. The group that the US have got, they should get out of into the knockouts. Pochettino is a top-class coach. He is a tactically very astute coach. So as long as I haven't done the bracket in my head to kind of learn it, but as long as you don't run into one of the top 5 or 6 favourites in the first knockout round, the US should look at the last 16, and the US in the last 16 of a home World Cup would be pretty spectacular.
Let's dream as 2025 charges into 2026. That's what we need to hold on to. That is it for today. I'm actually off to London this afternoon to go and play chess with a Premier League footballer who I think is going to crush me. I'm also headed back to Bournemouth to finish off the year with Tyler Adams and take your questions and have him answer them. This is actually the last pod for us until the beginning of January. Look out for a ton of end-of-year content that we're taping tomorrow together in London. Also a John Oliver special, which is a tradition, unlike any other on this network at the end of the year. But Raw, you beautiful human being, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow, Rog. Have a safe flight.
By the way, I love saying that and I love hearing it. This is Rog saying let's not take a second of watching football together for granted. Big, big love to all of you and your families over the holiday period, and courage.